turn to the Taxation, Transformation, First Phase, Simplification and Other Measures Bill. And the question is that Part 1 stand part. This is debate on clauses 3 to 69B and the schedule.
Mr. Chair.
We need a minister in the chair. Yep.
Mr. Chair.
We need a minister.
Change the government, we can provide one.
You haven't got a hope of providing one, even if we helped.
Come on, Amy, you've been working hard.
The question, order. We're going to start. Order, members. The question is that Part 1 stand part. I call Stuart Nash.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, this is an interesting bill. It's one we support. It's a Taxation, Transformation, First Phase, Simplification and Other Measures Bill. It's one of these bills which you would think that with everything going on in the tax world at the moment, there would be a much broader agenda that the government would be concentrating on instead of little nuances. But this is important in terms of the integrity of the tax system and in terms of bringing it into the 21st century. Of that, there is no doubt. As a lot of our other tax laws should be brought into the 21st century around overseas trusts and all that sort of carry on. We all know about that. Mr. Chair, and I'm assuming my colleague Grant Robinson is going to talk a little bit more about that at a certain point in time. Mr. Chair, this, as mentioned, this is about bringing the tax law, well, part of this, Part 1 certainly, is about bringing the tax law into the 21st century. And let me give you just one sort of brief example. What we talk about in this bill is things like, in the past it's talked about in writing. So in the past, what we've had to do, or what a taxpayer's had to do if they require anything from the IRD or from the Commissioner of the IRD, they have had to put it in writing, and it is not counted as valid, I suppose, for want of a better term, unless it has been in writing, and therefore if it's not, then I suppose it's challenged. Well, let me just give you just one brief exception, or one example, maybe a couple of examples. Clause 23, this relates to section EI1 of the Income Tax Act, and this is just an example of the sort of thing I'm talking about. EI13 in the Income Tax Act, this is spreading backward income from timber, and it says a person who wants to make an allocation under subsection 2 must apply in writing to the Commissioner no later than 1 year after the end of the income year in which they derive the income. What this Act will change to, what the section in the Income Tax Act will change to, Mr. Chair, is a person who wants to make an allocation under subsection 2 must apply to the Commissioner no later. So what we've done is we've taken out the term in writing, and there are a whole number of pieces of legislation that are being amended under the Income Tax Act, under the Tax Administration Act, under a whole lot of acts, Mr. Chair, that are covered by this bill. There is one interesting thing, though, that I would like to talk about, which I think is in the context of where we are in this day and age, is an interesting example. It didn't come up at Select Committee, and I consider myself slightly remiss because I didn't pick it up, to be honest. But this is clause 47 in Part 1 of the bill we're talking about. This is talking about repealing sections LZ9 to LZ12. This has been repealed, and let me tell you what LZ9 to LZ12 relate to. This is about credits for saving in special home ownership accounts. This has been deleted, so there's now no such thing as a tax credit for a home ownership account. What this actually did, Mr. Chair, is it meant that if a taxpayer put money into a special home ownership account as set up by the bank, then they got a credit of 4.5%. It was a very simple formula, but what it actually did is it provided another vehicle for New Zealanders to save for the first home. And we have heard many times in this House, Mr. Chair, how hard it is for New Zealanders to get into their home. So what this did, Mr. Chair, is LZ10, it gave a maximum amount for a 1 year special home ownership account for 1 year. And it's quite insightful, because what it actually says, and I quote, this is LZ10, for the purpose of calculating the amount of a credit under section LZ9, the maximum amount of a single increase in savings for a special home ownership account for a tax year is, wait for it, $3,000. $3,000. LZ11 talks about a maximum for that you can have to get this credit is $10,250. Now, this is a 2007 Income Tax Act, Mr. Chair, so it's only 9 years ago, and 9 years ago, we thought, when I say we, I'm talking about Parliament, we thought that having $10,250 in a home ownership account was actually a lot of money. In fact, we made that the maximum you could have in an account in order to get the tax credit. Now we look at home ownership, and if you've got $10,000 in an account, then you don't even get a meeting with the bank manager. In fact, the bank manager won't even open your email. In fact, I suspect the reason why we're repealing this piece of legislation as opposed to amending to the amount of money that you can have it is because A, home ownership accounts don't exist, B, because if we did think they were a good idea, we'd amend that from $10,250 to $100,000 because $100,000 is more likely the sort of, Mr. Chair?
Sure, Nash.
Thank you very much. Because $100,000, Mr. Chair, is the sort of money you do need in a home ownership account to have any chance whatsoever, certainly in Auckland, of getting a foot in the door. So we've repealed this. We've repealed the meanings of increase in savings, but that's just, it's just one of those anomalies, I suppose, and it's interesting to look at from an historical perspective because only in 2007 we thought this was important for New Zealanders to be able to save for their home. Now we've decided there are other vehicles, or we've probably decided what's the point in having $10,000 in an account? It's just not worth it. But Mr. Chair, back to what we are doing, the proactive side of this legislation. What we've actually said is, as mentioned, we've taken out by and large, when I say we, I'm talking about the Select Committee and I suppose Parliament as a whole. What we've done is we've taken out the sort of archaic term where you've got to apply in writing. Now let me give you quite a salient example of this. Just this evening I had dinner with a couple of tax experts and I said to them, your office is based in Lower Hutt, isn't it? And they said, no, we're in Featherston Street. And I said, but your PO box is in Lower Hutt. And they said, oh, yes, no, it is. It's down there. I said, how do you collect your mail? He said, literally, we collect it once every 3 months because no one writes us letters anymore. They said, we've had 3 letters in about 3 months. One of them was a card from me. Another of them was a cheque. Another of them was a cheque from the IRD. I'm not too sure how much it was. And the third one was a bill. And this reflects the 21st century. No one does anything in writing anymore. So what we've done, Mr. Chair, is replace them with words like ask, like request, like reply or notify. And these verbs have been defined to allow a freer interpretation of actions and how people work in the 21st century. What it has done is it's put emails on the same footing as paper letters delivered by post. There was some concern, well, no, there wasn't a concern, there was a query in the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee about how we would actually determine if someone had received one of these. But in a way, if you think about it, it's the same as if a letter was posted. How do you actually know if a person has received that letter? And it's actually, I would argue, and I think we argued, it's easier to determine whether a taxpayer has received an email as opposed to whether a taxpayer has received a letter. So this just improves the integrity, in a way, of the tax system. What it also does is it's part of the IRD's business transformation process that we hope is going to make things a lot more efficient, make it easier for taxpayers to engage with the IRD, but also make it easier for the IRD to engage with taxpayers. Because what we certainly require is taxpayers to work with the IRD, and if they can do it through electronic means, it is by far the easiest way to do it. And it would be interesting to know, and I don't know this, I doubt the Minister does, but how many transactions or how many interactions have been deemed null and void because what happened, there was an email conversation and then someone said, but you're not allowed to do this via email. It's got to be done via writing, via the Act. And I'm assuming what the IRD has done when they are communicating via email is they've taken the pragmatic approach and said, well, technically, by legislation, you've got to deliver something to us in writing. You've got to notify the Commissioner in writing. But because it's an email and because we've received it, it's all good. And so, as mentioned, we're probably all we're doing with the part 1 of this Act, Mr. Chair, is actually just legislating a practice which has gone on ever since email has been in common usage, I suspect. But what this does do is it's a simplification process, I suppose. And we always like to make tax law simplified. I know that sounds a little bit of an oxymoron, tax law and simplification. but yeah, we do like a little bit of complexity. Dr. Clark. But what this is about is it aims to provide a greater use of digital channels for increased convenience and reduction in compliance costs. Now, wouldn't that be great? So a reduction in compliance costs as well. And I suspect one of the major reductions in compliance costs will not necessarily be the taxpayer, it'll be the IRD. I think they were one of the largest customers of New Zealand Post until recently, because of course everything had to go out in writing and they complied with the law, so there was a lot of money spent in stamps. And I think what's a letter gone up to these days? I think it costs $1 to send out a letter, and they deliver 3 days a week. So this is sort of a pragmatic perspective from that. There's no doubt about that. And we're going to make, because we're going to make this very simple, these terms are going to be relevant, are going to be part of law, are going to be part of common practice from the day this bill receives extension. It's not going to be. It's not going to be, we're not going to wait until the end of the fiscal year just so the government can get every last little bit out of it. So it is it's part of as mentioned, it's part of the pragmatic process.
I call Julianne Jen.